Hey there, welcome to a new video. My name is BassTi and today I want to show you how I make my sub basses. Little fun fact, today is actually the 808 day, so it only made sense to me to make a video about sub basses / 808s today. For this video in particular, I can also obviously recommend to watch it with your headphones so you can truly hear what's going on in the lower frequencies. Finally, if you enjoy the video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe and leave a comment, which are the best ways to support me. At the moment, there are two synths I use for my sub basses. The first one is Serum 2, which is pretty obvious, but the second one is Current by Minimal Audio, and I will show you later what's special about it, so make sure to watch until the end so you don't miss out about what I like in Current particularly more than in Serum. Usually when I want to make a sub bass, I start with a sine wave. So I just grab the default shapes and put in a sine wave in here. And now I have different options to customize it. To turn it into a more 808-ish character, it's really nice to add like a pitch bend envelope on the sub bass, and I just use envelope 2 here. On the envelope 1, which controls the volume, I make sure there is no attack so we don't lose any of the initial impact we now want to make with the envelope 2. So I just create this envelope shape and apply this with the cos shift. Then I hit Shift and Alt to get rid of the bipolar. So we have the pitch fall down at the beginning and then the sine wave. And we can make this a little bit sharper, also get rid of the attack here, and also increase the range. And for example, this would also be the foundation for a kick drum. Let me know in the comments if you want a video about drum synthesis at some point. Now in the next step, we can go into the wavetable editor and draw in some additional harmonics to make the sub appear warmer. I really like adding some odd harmonics right here, and also some of the even harmonic, and just balance it so we can make this top as flat as possible so the sub bass has the most volume. So we basically want to give it the character of a square wave, if this makes sense to you. And we can just draw in some more harmonics and then go into the process and click normalize so it balances out in the volume spectrum. And now it sounds like this. It actually sounds a bit too strong for me, so we will actually get rid of some, because this is also something I really do often, to not over process the sub bass first, because later I apply a ton of group processing to my basses like distortion, compression and everything. So it does not make sense to me to work with a fully maximized sub already. But of course you can do that. It depends on the context and the sounds you want to lay on top of it or process together with the sub bass. Now it sounds like this. And usually in the next step, I would just render it to audio and throw in my additional layers on top of it, which I will also show you later in an example, so you can get an idea of what follows after this as group processing. Let's initialize the patch again, because now we could also just add distortion. And now we basically have a square, which can also be fun for people who just want 808s. We can draw the same envelope again on the cos pitch. And now we have the perfect 808. So 808s are really simple to do. And of course, you can also add in some more harmonics again if you want to give it a different flavor. Also make sure to normalize it. This sounds pretty fun. So you can get plenty of different characters just with the wavetable editing and with the distortion. And of course, you can also switch out the distortion like overdrive, which can also sound pretty fun, depending on what you want to make. Let's initialize the Serum patch again, because I want to show you one more method for sub basses. And the method is actually pretty simple. We just go into the warp mode section and select the band plus minus, because now you can see that we get some harmonics being introduced after bending this. So this would be without bending on 0%, only the sine wave. And now when we introduce some bending, we also get some harmonics. And this can sound pretty cool. Of course, you can also apply an envelope. And now you can also process it further with distortion again. What I like doing with this particular sub bass to maximize the fundamental, because you can see that the fundamental is not fully maximized, I grab the ambassador, and this is my go-to sub bass processing plugin. I use it all the time. And of course you can say, why don't you go into the wavetable editor and do it there? The first answer is we cannot do that right now because we are working with the band mode right here. So we don't have the control about the individual harmonics besides tweaking the band knob. Or you could say increase the volume. But my answer is that I don't want to boost the harmonics as well. And of course you can do it with an EQ and reduce it again. But for me, it sounds cleaner when I do it with Ambassador. What the Ambassador does is maximizing the signal you put in. And you have this range here. So you can say, I want everything to be maximized up to 60 Hertz. So let's quickly check what our sub bass was in. Our fundamental is under 60 Hz. And now in the ambassador, we have three things to consider. The level, which is the level of the bass we want to enhance. Then we have to enable the linear phase mode, so it sounds clean and does not create weird phasing issues in the crossover region. And we have the wet knob. So this is the dry signal. Now we can mix in the wet signal to maximize the fundamental. You can see that the harmonics are not getting any louder because the area is capped at 56 Hz. And of course, we can increase it. Now we can see that the harmonics are also being increased, which can also sound fun in some context. But for me, this is my go-to method when I want to work with a maximized sub right at the beginning. But now let's get to the second synth, Current by Minimal Audio, because when I use this for my sub basses, I actually do it the opposite. I always work with a not maximized version of the sign because I maximize it later. I don't know why. You can also do it with Serum, what I will explain you now. But for me, this method has worked several times really well, and I enjoy this actually more than doing it with Serum. So this is what Current looks like. I'm pretty sure you have seen this already. And the cool thing in Current is that it actually has a sub oscillator with some neat functions. This is what it sounds like by default. And you can see we already have some harmonics here. And this comes because of the harmonic section right here. And now we can have really precise control about the partials, which are basically the even and odd harmonics of the sub bass. So this would be the even harmonic. And now in this situation, we have the even and the odd harmonic. And we can get more. Usually I work with 4 partials. We can also decide how the cutoff should be. So if we want a warmer sub with the even harmonic pronounced, or like something in between. And the cool thing about this is that we can reduce the volume of the harmonics without losing any volume of the sub bass. So the sub bass, the fundamental, always has the same loudness. And now we can mix in the partials and won't lose anything in the sub region, which would be a little bit more work, or which would be a little bit more tricky to set up in Serum right. The second cool thing is that it comes with a knock knob. So we can already add the transients and also instantly apply distortion, which can sound pretty cool. The noise one sounds really fire. So this is some really easy sub bass making. And the distortions sound more interesting than Serum in my opinion. So I said, of course, you can also add some more distortion with the effects, with the polar distortion. So you can do some crazy asymmetrical distortion and just create some interesting behavior depending on what you want to make. But now I actually want to show you a proper example. So this is the tear-out gun foundation I use for my Thailand remix. We have the high layers, which I won't go in depth today. So this is just like the tear-out gun components. And there we have the sub bass. And you can see I also applied some EQing down here and the kick tight, which I mentioned in my top 5 dubstep hacks video. Definitely make sure to watch this video if you are interested in what the kick tight does. Let's quickly go into Current. You can see that I'm using the sub oscillator again. And I applied 2 additional partials besides the sub fundamental. And I also applied some more envelopes. We have this pitch curve envelope, which is just controlling the pitches. So I'm not using the knock here because I wanted to go for a softer pitch. And I'm also automating the level with this envelope right here. Without the processing, would sound like this. So it sounds really subtle. And when we enable the effects again, it sounds like this. I actually got rid of some of the harmonics here. So we only had the emphasis on the first even and first odd harmonic. And now we can add post-processing, because what I really like doing is working with a soft sub, which is this one right here, and then making it fat in the post-processing to glue everything together, because now it sounds like different things. We have the tonal and transient layer, and we have the sub layer playing. It does not sound like one thing, which is important in dubstep, to make a main sound like a tear-out gun sound like one consistent sound and not be able to identify the different layers which are incorporated into this. My go-to method for making this fat is the kilohertz distortion. I usually go with the saturate preset. And now we get some more character. Of course, I do plenty of more steps, which I explained multiple times already on my channel, like more distortion, then a band split with different processing on the low band, and then it goes into a crunch chain. Let me know if you want a detailed method about all crunch methods. In this case, I would make the high layer a little bit quieter. And now you can play around with the bias or with the spread. You get like cool stereo stuff happening, which is cool, but you need to watch out. If you don't know how to work with this right, I would not recommend working with the spread, but you can get some really cool textures out of this. So now let's just mimic that. For some reason, we lost some character of the sub bass because of more processing going on. So let's just mimic that with an EQ bell down here. So now the sub bass is obviously quieter. And to get rid of this, I would use BassTi again to just make sure the sub bass hits the loudest. And now you can do more processing steps, make the high band louder again, do a split. There's so many methods. I don't want to go into detail, but I think you got an idea of what's possible and how I treat my sub basses. So the key learnings are basically that I add even and odd harmonics, that I sometimes use the band warping modes and BassTi, sometimes current, sometimes more distortion, sometimes less distortion. There's many different ways, but my go-to method when I work on a main sound is having a separate sub, which I then glue together with the different layers. For filler sounds like growls, dinosaur basses, Reese's, and so on, I most of the time work with the native sub without adding an additional sound wave in the processing steps. And that's it for today's video. I included all the links for the plugins down in the description. Let me know if you learned something and see you in the next one. Have a great day and goodbye.